Hi, I'm Steve Pleich. Welcome to this edition of BTS Presents. Well, I've been a volunteer for suicide prevention, worked in the crisis call line for about 5 years. Before that, I worked the Domestic Violence Victims Hotline for the Walnut Avenue Women's Center. I am founder of a local needle exchange here, which is now run by the county. I'm the director of the Homeless Persons Legal Assistance Project. I've been a sanctuary steward for Save Our Shores for about 5 years. I'm the vice chair of the Santa Cruz County ACLU. I'm on the steering committee for the Santa Cruz County Coalition to Overcome Racism. I'm a member of the United Nations Association. Let's see, what else have I done? I ran for city council in 2010, 2012, unsuccessfully, but hopefully next year will be a different story. And in the last couple of years or so, I've been fortunate enough, through the people I've met here at Community TV, to do a number of television programs. I did one segment of Human Rights Here and Now for David Sweet. I've done several Voices from the Village with Charlie Phillips. I have my own series now, The Conversation Continues, where we're highlighting local public service agencies. I just did, in fact, suicide prevention was my last show, and I'll be doing voices regularly for Louis LaFortune until he decides to come back and take over the show himself, and just about anything else that is of any interest around town. I've been a long time homeless advocate, and certainly in favor of the Santa Cruz Sanctuary Camp idea, and right now we're actually looking for a basic dignity campaign to put enough bathrooms on the levee so people can have basic dignity, to be able to get some water and be able to relieve themselves when they need to. That's a big campaign of ours, and there's several other things going on in terms of really homeless advocacy, because it is a hot button issue in town. And there are many other things happening that just tangential to this, that are either political or in terms of social and economic justice. I was one of the founding members of Occupy Santa Cruz. I'm very much of a supporter of the Santa Cruz 11, and really had their support group just put up a website for them. So there's a lot to do in Santa Cruz. It's a wonderful community to be engaged in. It's a great time to be engaged in Santa Cruz, and anybody who really wants to get a feeling of what Santa Cruz is and can be involved in either one or more of these. And I will hasten to say also that tonight I'll be a monitor for the Interfaith Satellite Shelter Program, which shelters 25 to 30 individuals each night in a rotating church around town. So we're trying to solve some of the homeless need for shelter. Some people say we should go to a housing first model. Let's house all of our homeless folks. That's impractical because there just isn't enough housing. But we can shelter them and make their lives more comfortable, and perhaps give them some opportunities to transition from reduced circumstances to a place where they can themselves retain some of the basic dignity that I'm talking about, and maybe re-enter the workforce and mainstream society if that's what they choose to do. But we're going to help them out in any way that we can to do that. So that's our mission, and my mission, in fact, as a homeless advocate. But as I say, there are a lot of people in Santa Cruz doing an awful lot of good work, and I just happen to be one person doing that. My inspiration also really is Curtis Relaford, who, if you know Curtis, has been to New Orleans to aid the Katrina hurricane victims 17 times now. Curtis calls himself just an ordinary man trying to do the right thing, and that's a wonderful thing to keep in mind. So that's for us. Yeah.
What would you say in your life best prepared you for a role on the City Council?
I think that my work as a community organizer over the last half a dozen years or so, in terms of building consensus amongst, arguably or initially disparate groups and opinions, is very important, because really you're always going to have some disagreement on the major issues. And so the ability to be able to talk to groups and have them accept you as a spokesman. I am fortunate enough during the Occupy, I was the police liaison to the chain of command for the Santa Cruz Police Department. I have good existing relationships with Take Back Santa Cruz and Santa Cruz neighbors, as well as the people who advocate most strongly for the homeless community. I am comfortable in all of those groups, and so it makes me able to kind of move comfortably from one group to the other, carrying a message of conciliation, or carrying a message of understanding, or carrying a message of compromise that will eventually move us farther down the road, and not have people be at loggerheads, which they seem to be when there is no opportunity to really discuss those things even-handedly.
Could you see yourself heading down this road maybe 30 years ago, 20 years ago?
Oh, absolutely. But I didn't, regrettably. I spent a lot of time kind of just traveling, just enjoying the world, just kind of being self-indulgent. As I say, I've had my retirement already. Now it's time for me to work. And so the next 30 years or so of my life, if I'm given that much time or more, will be entirely devoted every day. I work 7 days a week, 18 hours a day. I never take a day off because it's time for me to work. It's time for me to improve the world, and I'm starting with this part of the world now.
It sounds like you really care a lot about people. Is there something that happened even as a child that helped you develop?
No, I think my parents, really gave me an appreciation of how important family and friends and support is. I will say that working for various crisis lines has sharpened that, if nothing else. That there are people in need, people who have certain situations that need some sensitivity and some empathy, and for some reason I have been given the gift to be able to give some of that empathy and sympathy. I think a lot of it is nature and not necessarily nurture. But my parents were great. They taught me a lot of good things. My stepfather taught me the value of listening. My mother taught me the value of speaking clearly and directly. My father taught me the value of other than material goods in the world. Those kinds of things have served me well through my entire life. And so whether or not that's contributed to my passion for people, I don't know. But somehow all of that has been an element that has defined me, as the person I am.
There are so many facets on the table, so many issues on the table. And many of them are about addressing systems that are not working. But can you please speak about about the people that you're serving? Are we serving these people because they're broken or there's something wrong with them? Can you talk about your perspective, where you're coming from? Are we trying to fix something that's broken? Are we creating something new? Where is your heart in that respect?
I don't view my work in a social context, for instance, as fixing something or someone that's broken. You're improving a system that exists. You're trying to help people who are in reduced circumstances transition into better circumstances. But for instance, I'll give you an example. When we designed this homeless jobs program, we didn't go into it saying, well, we're going to take these people from nothing and we're going to make them into something. We go into it thinking that these people already have skills and talents and intelligence. We just were trying to figure out a way to prepare them for the job market. So we're not fixing them. We are maybe molding and transitioning what skills they already have into something that's going to be more marketable and useful. But I don't believe in the concept of, the system is broken or people are broken, because that indicates to me that something, has broken them. And if something's broken people, then that's our fault as well. So let's go from the point of view of saying that people have ability, they have strengths. Let's maximize those strengths. Let's draw those strengths out of them. Let's draw those skills out of them. That is truly our calling.
So, Steve, I was wondering how you would help the mentally challenged, homeless people.
Well, and that's one of the most difficult questions of all, because as most people who live in Santa Cruz County know, our mental health and behavioral health agencies are so overwhelmed with people who are housed that have problems that they really have difficulty treating anyone else. I do think that the 180 program that has focused on the most vulnerable people with comorbidities of drug or alcohol use and some mental problem, is a way to be able to help those people who are vulnerable in that sense. But that's a structural problem. That's a systemic problem. If we had the money, I think that there is the goodwill enough to want to give services to anybody who needs them in terms of mental health. So that's a better question for a county supervisor, and I wouldn't mind being county supervisor someday, so I could really address that problem directly and say, you know what, we need to put more money into our mental health services so that we can really help the people who need it, because there's so much need in our county. They're good men, and unfortunately they're all men now, but you know, there's not much gender equity on that board, unfortunately, but they're people of goodwill. And I think they would like to help as much as they can. But it's a question of whether or not they can find the resources to do that. I have always believed that the resources exist to be able to help people. But the resources have to be used efficiently, and they have to be directed at where the most need is. And if we can do that, it takes a shift in the paradigm, really, of how we allocate money and where we spend it. For instance, I'll give you an example in terms of drug rehabilitation. Our county and city spends about $2 in enforcement for every dollar in rehabilitation. You flip that around and you really be able to help people who are in need. But that takes courageous, principled stands from those folks that we've elected to those offices. We need the courageous, principled stand of regular citizens who will put people who can do that, who can fulfill that mandate, into office. So that's something everybody can do, and it's a question that everybody should ask. Yeah.
I got a question to ask.
Sure.
Where do you stand on Desal?
Well, I was saying earlier that I was one of the original founding members. Well, it's redundant. I was a founding member of Desal Alternatives and a founding member of the Right to Vote on Desal Coalition. We gathered 8,800 signatures, put the Measure P on the ballot, and it was passed overwhelmingly to give the people of Santa Cruz the right to vote on whether or not they want to construct the desal plant when it becomes shovel ready, when they're ready to construct that. I believe that there are better alternatives for our water security than desalination. I think that we have to think more about rainwater catchment systems, greywater recycle, wastewater recycling is only maybe 5 years down the road. It's a tremendous amount of water that can come back into the system. We haven't really tapped all of the conservation approaches that we can use. And just on the minus side, desal is extremely energy intensive. It takes carbon fuel to run it, and it's tremendously expensive. And as a sanctuary steward for Save Our Shores, I can tell you that the impact on the environment of a desalination plant is really yet to be determined, regardless of what their studies think they show. So I certainly believe that I'm not opposed, but I am in favor of alternatives to desalination. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
And one other question. Rail and trail. Rail and trail?
Yeah.
Rail trail? Where do you stand on the rail trail?
With that money, that $14.3 million was a designated fund. It could only be spent on acquiring that land. I have real questions about whether or not we will ever be able to raise the tens of millions of dollars it will take to convert that 30-mile piece of property between Watsonville, actually Pajaro, and Davenport into a true rail trail, a walking bike trail. There are 39 trestles and bridges on that land, all of them needing retrofitting. The safety concerns about running a bike and rail trail so close to the rail itself things that need to be addressed. It's going to run through people's backyards in Aptos. I think it's a wonderful idea. I think that we could do nothing but buy that because that money was available and could only be used for that. Otherwise, it would go back to the state. So there's no reason not to be able to buy that. But it does create some problems for the county in that Sierra Northern or Northern Iowa, whoever is running that freight and passenger rail service now, if they can't run that at a profit, they won't run it, which means the county is going to have to run it. We are not qualified as a county to run it. So those are some of the questions that need to be answered. The people who are strongly in favor of the bike and walking trail, People Power, my good friend Micah Posner, Celia Scott and her husband Peter Scott, very big advocates for that, and they are people who want to see Santa Cruz preserved and beautified for everyone's use, and I hope that that can be successful down the road. But there are some significant funding challenges and some significant practical challenges in actually making it what people would like it to be. But do I want to see it happen? Of course, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your education background, where you come from, and what makes you a representative of the community in such an effective manner?
Well, my first go-around in college, I was a psychology major. I wrote audiovisual teaching programs, softcover textbooks, and I went back to law school in 1986 and got a Bachelor of Science in Law and a Juris Doctor degree. So I worked as a research lawyer in San Jose for 6 or 8 years. When I came over to Santa Cruz, which was my mom's home and my brother's home in the past, I really started doing more community work and volunteer work, and so I wasn't interested in doing any practice of law, but I did want to use my experience and my education for the community benefits, so I founded the Homeless Persons Legal Assistance Project, and so I do legal assistance for basically the entire homeless community. Anybody who can and wants to can call me, and I will do my best to answer their legal questions and work out some of the challenges for homeless folks are a lack of identification. And a lot of that lack of identification or lack of a clean record really is attributable to some old crime they committed or offense, even however minor, and a fine they didn't pay. And so oftentimes homeless folks will come to me and say, well, can you help me expunge my record so that when I go to try to get housing or financial assistance or a job, that I won't have this disincentive anyway on my employment record. And of course, employers can only ask about certain things in terms of your criminal background, but it's best to have these things expunged to your satisfaction anyway, so that you can go into it and be truthful about what your background happens to be in terms of anything that might have been a misstep when you're in your youth. So I feel like that's really helped me to be of assistance to the homeless community in terms of clearing a record or taking care of a minor legal matter or making sure that they can navigate our local court systems, which is a mystery to almost anybody, homeless or housed. So that it gives me an opportunity to continue to use my legal experience and education, which I loved. I loved being in law school. I loved the experience of law school. I was valedictorian in my law school class, so I was pretty good at it. But that's given me the ability to be able to help people now whilst not having to be a practicing lawyer.
What are the things that you see that are out ahead of what's currently going on that we might need to be thinking about that isn't even on the table to be considered at this point?
Well, I think one of the things that we're really going to have to give some serious consideration to, and I would love to see the city become more engaged in that, is the homeless jobs program that I was talking about. Whilst Homeless Services Center does a pretty good job in providing services and really maintaining homeless folks more or less in the same condition from day to day to day, we would like to see some transition in the services that are provided. And so when we decide to launch this homeless jobs program, it's called Hope Swells. You can go and look at the program on hopeswells.org. It's an ambitious program that involves the Homeless Aquaponics Project, Sustainable Foods Project, actually foodscaping and community garden projects, as well as some coastal stewardship and some kind of just give back programs. I think that's the kind of thing that the city really needs to be engaged in. And if we can convince the city council that it's worth their time and effort and a little bit of their money, I think that we can be even more successful than we already intend to be. I think also we have to really look at how we're going to develop our economy in Santa Cruz. I think we've had some problems with just a lack of developing a business atmosphere and a place where people can really come and enjoy themselves and yet be able to thrive commercially. One of the things that I've really wanted to see done and have advocated for a long time is to go back to a walking mall downtown. There isn't any conceivable reason at all why the mall couldn't be closed from Mission to about where the Metro Center is, to re-landscape that, to put some patio dining out there, to really make it, a beautiful, attractive, pleasant experience for people, not only for tourists, but for are residents of Santa Cruz. I said during my campaign in 2012, people asked me, well, what would you do in the neighborhoods? What would you do downtown? I said, well, I would treat downtown like a neighborhood. It's like any other neighborhood. And you should be able to enliven it by making it thrive, making it beautiful, and making it accessible. And so that's one of the things that I would like to see, again, the City Council take up as a project, as a program, were I on City Council, were I fortunate enough to win a seat in the upcoming election next year, then I'll be able to drive some of that myself from inside. If not, it's part of what community organizing is all about. You know, you take ideas to the electeds, you take ideas to the policymakers, the gatekeepers, the stakeholders. You say, this is a program that you should be able to buy into and look at and say, yeah, that's a good idea for Santa Cruz. That's the thing I think that would enliven economic development in Santa Cruz beyond anything else that we could even consider right now. And those are just a couple of things. As far as policy measures are concerned, certainly the Desal question is coming up. Everybody should take a good hard look at that. I was one of the founders of the Desal Alternatives and the Right to Vote on Desal Coalition. We gathered about 8,800 signatures to put that on the ballot last year, and it passed overwhelmingly. So it gave people in Santa Cruz the opportunity to vote on the construction of a desal plant when it's shovel ready, when they're ready to begin construction. But that's something that everybody really should take a long look at and get as much information and be as knowledgeable about that as they possibly can, because that will really determine our water sustainability, our future, and our environmental future, really, for the next 50 years or so. And those are some of the really important questions, I think, that are really on the table. For myself, on a personal note, during the campaign last year, people asked me, one of the questions the Chamber of Commerce asked me was whether I thought there was too much police presence downtown. And I said, yeah. I believe that there is altogether too much police presence downtown, and I thought that perhaps they should be more allocated toward being in the neighborhoods, being out there in the other neighborhoods to make sure those neighborhoods are safe. One of the things that I would like to see revisited is the Citizens Police Action Review Board. About a decade ago, they had such a board that was able to give some civilian oversight to police practices, police procedures, and we're not talking about looking over a police officer's shoulder as he performs his duty. You're talking about how they're allocating their funds, how they're determining what kind of patrols they're going to be operating, where those patrols are most effective, whether or not we can really have citizens involved in low-level non-police activities and not have it be viewed as vigilantism. Those are the kinds of things that we really need some civilian oversight and control as far as I'm concerned. I have talked to people that were involved in that Citizens Police Review Board some years back, Bob Tarrant, local attorney, and John Malkin. People probably know John from community TV and other media around town. And so they're giving me their insight on that. And so that's one of the programs, initiatives that I'm trying to push forward. But that's really on the political side. Day to day, I have a suicide intervention crisis call room shift once or twice every week. I'll do a beach cleanup for Save Our Shores once or twice every week. I am involved in the ACLU, and we'll do that because there are a lot of civil liberties questions that are in town. SCORE is primarily involved with overcoming racism in Santa Cruz County. If you ask people if they think there's any racism in Santa Cruz County, they might say, well, geez, I don't think so. But if you see the things that are happening nationally, and I think we are a reflection to a certain extent of that, there is a need to address that. And so those are the things that I'm involved with every day. But that's just part of being a community person.
One more question?
Of course.
So I understand that there's some issues in the legal community about legalization of things like gambling, smoking in public spaces, sitting on the sidewalk, sleeping.
Yeah. Well, those kinds of sit-lie laws, targeted ordinances basically against homeless people or any other desirable element in the community that prevent them from sleeping in public spaces or sitting in public spaces or lying in public spaces are a product of local ordinance. There is really not much in terms of federal legislation that really determines any of that. Friends of mine like Ed Fry, a longtime attorney, has attempted in the past to litigate a lot of those ordinances on constitutional grounds, finding that they are violations of freedom of speech or freedom of assembly, and indeed they are, but they're really more easily litigated in terms of a local ordinance that really disproportionately impacts an undesirable group in the community, in our case, the homeless. So most of our litigation in the past has really been in terms of trying to show that those particular ordinances are just applied disproportionately, unevenly, and to the prejudice of folks who otherwise wouldn't be doing anything except, perhaps, making the business community unhappy. So, that's one of those things. But there is something now. The City Council has just passed an ordinance to make it illegal to do anything on a median strip in the street. And as anybody knows, anybody who's done any political activism around town, if you have an event, a lot of times you'll have people in the streets with the signs and everything. So we believe at the ACLU, and I'm the vice chair of our local ACLU, that ordinance is a violation of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly, and we're intending to challenge that on that basis, perhaps in federal court or at least here in our local courts. So in terms of that kind of ordinance, there is a direct relationship between your constitutional guarantee and the ordinance itself. Sit-lie laws, they're unfortunately very prevalent. We have them here. Berkeley has them. Palo Alto has them. A lot of places have them. And that's just a matter of local political will. We unfortunately have people who have wanted to penalize and criminalize homelessness for a long period of time. That's just one of the ways in which they've been able to do that. You get new leadership, new ideas. I think that there is probably a way to abolish those particular ordinances without it impacting the business community or the quality of life one bit. So I'm against them, and I would work in any way that I could to have those repealed.
So thank you, Steve, for being here. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to have you on the BTS Presents show, and I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here.
The pleasure is mine.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Community Television thanks Hoffman's Bistro for their support. Hoffman's is located at 1102 Pacific Avenue in beautiful downtown Santa Cruz and is open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner 7 days a week starting at 8 a.m. They feature live local jazz bands starting every night at 6:30. Hoffman's Bakery makes everything in-house from Ed Hoffman's famous scones to decadent wedding cakes. For more information, visit hoffmansantacruz.com or phone 420-0135.